She didn't know I had come back early from my walk. She didn't know the screen door at the side of the house doesn't latch unless you pull it twice. By Tuesday morning, the deed she thought she was about to inherit had been placed in a trust she could not reach. Here is what actually happened. My name is Catherine. I am 75 years old. My husband Augustin died in 2019. He left me the house we had lived in for 46 years. A modest, split level, in a neighborhood where most of our neighbors had moved on, but where I had stayed, because the dogwood in the back yard had been planted by Augustin in the summer of 1981, and I was not yet ready to let the dogwood belong to someone else. The house was paid off. The deed was in my name alone. I want you to remember that detail. The deed was in my name alone. It mattered. In the spring of 2024, my son Whitman had called me on a Tuesday morning. His voice had the careful quality it has when he is about to ask me for something. He and his wife Magnolia have already decided I will say yes to. Mum, listen, the lease on our place is up in August. The rent is going up almost $400 a month. We were thinking, Magnolia and I were thinking, would it be okay if we moved in with you for a few months while we figure out our next step? I had said yes. I had said yes, the way mothers say yes, in the brief moment between the question being asked and the question being understood. That had been 20 months ago. In those 20 months, Whitman and Magnolia had not paid me any rent. They had not contributed to property taxes or utilities. They had, however, made themselves comfortable. Magnolia had repainted the second-floor hallway in a color called wheaten bone without asking me. She had reorganized my kitchen pantry in a way that put the flour and the sugar on shelves I could not reach. She had moved the small antique writing desk that had belonged to my mother, the one Augustin had refinished for me on my 50th birthday, into the basement, to free up some space in the den. Catherine, it's such a beautiful piece, but it just looked a little crowded up there. I had laughed each time. I had laughed because the alternative, calling my daughter-in-law, what the evidence was beginning to suggest, she was felt larger than I was yet willing to call her. I had also been taking longer and longer morning walks. The walks had started in October as a way to be out of the house when Magnolia was making breakfast for the four of them. My son, my daughter-in-law, my two grandchildren at the kitchen island, that had become, by the small accumulated decisions of 20 months, Magnolia's kitchen. I had told myself the walks were for my health. They were partly for my health. They were also for the small dignity of leaving a room I had cooked in for 46 years, before I could be politely asked to leave it. On the Saturday morning this story begins, I had left the house at 7:45 for what I had told Magnolia would be the long route, probably back by 9. I had been back by 8:12. I had been back early because the sky had turned the particular grey it turns before rain, and I had not brought my umbrella, and I had not wanted to walk home in the rain at 75 years old when my own house was 4 blocks away. I had not gone through the front door. I had gone through the side door, the one that opens directly into the kitchen, because the side door is closer to where I leave my walking shoes, and because 20 months into my own displacement from my own front entryway, I had begun, without realizing it, to enter my house like a person sneaking in. The side door has an old aluminum screen door. The screen door does not latch unless you pull it twice. The first pull catches softly. The second pull engages the latch. I had pulled it once. The screen door had appeared to close. It had not closed. This is important. I want you to remember this detail too. The screen door had not closed. I was sitting on the small bench in the side mudroom, untying my walking shoes, when I heard Magnolia's voice from the kitchen. She was on the phone. The kitchen was around the corner from the mudroom. The doorway between the two rooms was open. The screen door behind me, open, not closed, meant that the side hallway was, acoustically, an extension of the kitchen. Magnolia could not see me. She also could not hear me, because I was not making any sound. She was, however, very audible to me. She was saying, "Mom, I know, but Whitman has been talking to her about the deed for 3 months, and she just keeps saying she'll think about it. She still thinks this house is hers. I mean, technically, fine, it's hers on paper. But come on, we live here, the kids go to school here, we pay the—" A pause. Her mother said something I could not hear. Right, exactly. The thing is, if we can just get her to put us on the deed for tax purposes, Whitman's accountant has been very clear about why this makes sense. Then when she goes, which is, I mean, she's 75. Mom, we have to be realistic when she goes. It just transitions cleanly. No probate. No fight with the lawyers. No surprises. We just need her to sign the paperwork. Whitman is going to bring it up again at dinner tomorrow night. He has a folder ready. We've talked it through. Another pause. She's stubborn, Mom. She has these little ways of changing the subject. The last time Whitman brought it up, she literally walked out into the backyard and started deadheading the petunias. We need her to focus. She still thinks this house is hers. She still thinks she gets to decide. Magnolia's mother said something. Magnolia laughed. "Oh, I know, believe me, the petunias are immaculate." I sat in the mudroom in my socks. The screen door was still not latched. I did not breathe loudly. I waited. When Magnolia hung up, the phone call lasted another 2 or 3 minutes about her sister's kids and a recipe. I waited an additional 90 seconds. Then I quietly put my walking shoes back on. I stood up. I opened the screen door gently and stepped back outside. I pulled the door twice. The second pull engaged the latch. I walked to the front of the house. I rang the doorbell. Magnolia answered it. She looked surprised to see me. "Catherine, I thought you said the long route." The sky turned grey. I came back. "May I come in?" She laughed. "Of course, it's your house." I noted the laugh. I noted the phrase. I stepped inside, took off my walking shoes in the front foyer like a guest, and went upstairs to my bedroom to change. I did not say a word about what I had heard. I want to pause here and ask you something honestly. If you walked into your own kitchen and heard your daughter-in-law on the phone to her own mother, in your own house say she still thinks this house is hers, what would you have done in the next 10 seconds? I think a lot of women would have walked into the kitchen and confronted her. I think some would have started crying. I think a brave handful would have said, "Magnolia, I am going to need you to repeat that sentence so that I am sure I heard it correctly." I did not do any of those things. I want to tell you why. If I had confronted her, Magnolia would have said the same thing she said when the petunias came up. "Catherine, you misheard. I would never say that. That's not what I meant." She would have spent the next 6 months working on me to make sure I doubted what I had heard. She would have used the doubt as the lever for the dinner with the folder. Whitman was already planning for the next night. By summer, I would have been on the deed. By the following spring, the house would have been ours, which is the word adult children use when they have moved their possession of a thing from the future tense to the present tense without telling the person who currently owns it. The most powerful thing a woman can do when she has just heard herself described in the third person by someone who did not know she was listening is not announce that she heard. The sentence becomes evidence in her pocket. The sentence is no longer something she has to argue about. The sentence is something she now possesses. I walked upstairs. I changed out of my walking clothes. I came back down. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat in the small breakfast nook by the kitchen window, the same window through which Magnolia had been speaking to her mother 20 minutes earlier, and I drank the tea. Magnolia made polite conversation with me. I made polite conversation back. At 11 o'clock, I told her I was going out to run a few errands. She asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no. I drove to my friend Adelaide's house. I told Adelaide everything. Adelaide is 78. She has been my friend since 1971. She listened to the entire story without interrupting. When I had finished, she stood up, walked to her small home office, and came back with a business card. Catherine, you are going to call this woman on Monday morning at 9. The card read, Persephone Vance Estate and Trust Attorney. Adelaide, I have a lawyer. Cordelia drafted your will. That is a different category of lawyer. Persephone specializes in moving deeds into trusts in 24 hours, when an older woman has just realized she is being prepared for. She is 42 years old. She is very good. I have referred 3 women to her in the last 5 years. All 3 of them are now sleeping in their own beds, with the deed to their own house, held in a trust their children cannot reach. I took the card. Adelaide, why did you not tell me about Persephone earlier? Catherine, because you did not need her earlier, today you do. I drove home. I had dinner with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandchildren. Magnolia served roast chicken. The chicken was very good. The grandchildren told me about their week at school. Whitman asked me, twice, whether I had given any more thought to the conversation we were having a few weeks ago about long-term planning. I said, Whitman, I have been thinking about it. I am going to give you an answer soon. He smiled. I noticed that the small folder Magnolia had mentioned on the phone was, in fact, sitting on the sideboard. It was a manila folder with the corner of a document protruding. I noticed that Whitman had not opened it tonight. He was, I now understood, saving the folder for tomorrow night's dinner. He had been told by his wife to bring it up again, and tomorrow night was when he was planning to. He would not get the chance. I went to bed at 10. I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has decided what is going to happen and is simply waiting for Monday morning at 9. On Monday morning at 8:59, I dialed the number on Persephone Vance's business card. She picked up on the second ring. Persephone Vance. Persephone. My name is Catherine. Adelaide Marlowe gave me your card on Saturday afternoon. I would like to move the deed to my house into an irrevocable trust by Friday at the latest. I would like to do so without informing my son or his wife, who currently live in the house with me. I would like to know whether this is something you can help me with, and how quickly. A small silence. Then Persephone said, Catherine, may I ask one question first? Yes. Why irrevocable? Most clients in your situation prefer a revocable trust because it preserves their flexibility. An irrevocable trust is harder to undo. Most lawyers will steer you toward the revocable structure unless there is a specific reason to recommend otherwise. Persephone, the reason is this. If the trust is revocable, my son and his wife, who have spent the last 20 months making themselves comfortable in a house that does not belong to them, who I overheard on Saturday morning planning to ask me to sign a deed addition at dinner tonight, will, the moment they discover what I have done, begin the next phase of working on me. They will be charming, they will be tearful, they will be patient. They will spend the next 3 years asking me, in small, soft ways, to revoke the trust. They are 43 and 41 years old, respectively. They are healthier than I am. They will outlast my resolve. I do not trust myself, at 75, to hold a revocable position against a 41-year-old daughter-in-law who has a folder of paperwork ready and a mother on the other end of the phone, advising her on strategy. I want the decision to be irrevocable so that the question is closed, permanently, even to me, especially to me. Persephone did not answer for a long moment. Then she said, Catherine, that is the most clear-eyed reason a client has ever given me for an irrevocable trust. I can have the paperwork drafted by Thursday morning. We can sign Thursday afternoon. Will you be able to come to my office without your son or daughter-in-law knowing where you are going? I take a long walk every morning. I will tell them I am going to my walk. I will come to your office instead. Excellent. Thursday at 10 a.m. address is on the card. We hung up. I sat at my own kitchen table for a moment, with my hand on the phone. I had just made a decision that could not be undone. I had made it without consulting anyone except a friend, a card, and a 42-year-old lawyer I had never met. I noticed, sitting there in my own kitchen, that my hands were not shaking. I noticed that I felt something I had not felt in 20 months. I felt, for the first time since the spring of 2024, like the owner of my own house. Tuesday night's dinner came and went. Whitman did not bring up the folder. I noticed this. He had clearly been told by Magnolia to wait. They had probably decided, over the weekend, that Sunday's dinner had been the wrong moment because I had been distracted by the morning's rainstorm and they needed me focused. Or perhaps Magnolia had seen something in my face on Saturday afternoon that had made her uncertain. I would never know which. It did not matter. I served Magnolia a second slice of pie. She thanked me warmly. Whitman talked about his work. The grandchildren played a game on Whitman's phone. I smiled. I cleared the dishes. I went to bed. I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has scheduled an irrevocable transfer for Thursday at 10 and her family does not know it is coming. I want to tell you something about that Wednesday. It was the longest day of my life. I had not realized, before that Wednesday, how much of my emotional energy for the previous 20 months had been spent absorbing the small, daily indignities, the rearranged pantry, the moved writing desk, the wheat and bone hallway, the way Magnolia called the kitchen hours, the way Whitman called the house hours, the way the grandchildren had begun calling the upstairs hallway our hallway and converting them, in real time, into laughter. The laughter had been work. I had not known how much work it had been until the Wednesday I had stopped doing it. On that Wednesday, knowing that Thursday at 10 was coming, I sat with the indignities without laughing at them. I noticed every single one. I noticed how Magnolia entered my kitchen without knocking on the doorway. I noticed how she opened my refrigerator with the casual entitlement of a woman who has long since stopped thinking of it as my refrigerator. I noticed how Whitman walked through my house with the small, unconscious posture of a man who believed, at some level he could no longer have articulated, that the floorboards were already his. I noticed how the grandchildren, 11 and 13, had begun referring to my bedroom, in passing, as the spare room. They did not say it cruelly. They said it the way children repeat phrases they have heard their parents use. I noticed all of it. I did not laugh at any of it. I drank tea. I read a book in the backyard near the dogwood. I did not deadhead the petunias. At 8:30 Wednesday night, I told Magnolia I was going to bed early because I wanted to do my long walk in the morning before the rain came back. She said, "Of course, Catherine, sleep well." I went to bed. I did not sleep. I waited for Thursday. Thursday morning at 9:45, I left the house in my walking shoes. I told Whitman, who was making coffee in the kitchen, "Long route today, back by 11:30. He nodded without looking up. I walked 2 blocks. I got into my car, which I had moved to a side street the previous evening on the pretense of letting Magnolia's car have the driveway. I drove to Persephone Vance's office. I arrived at 10:01. Persephone was a small, calm woman with short black hair and the careful posture of a person who had spent 20 years signing irrevocable documents for older women. She greeted me at the door. She offered me coffee. She walked me to a conference room where a stack of documents was waiting on a polished table. A notary was already seated at the table. We signed. The signing took 43 minutes. When I signed the final page, the irrevocable transfer of the deed of my house into a trust I had named the Augustin Marlowe Trust, with my granddaughter Tessa as the contingent beneficiary on my death, Persephone said, very quietly, "Catherine, it is done. As of this moment, you no longer own the house. The trust owns the house. You hold a lifetime occupancy right. You may live in the house, alone or with whomever you choose to invite, for the rest of your life. On your death, the house passes to Tessa, untouchable by her parents, held in further trust until she is 25. Your son and daughter-in-law have no claim. They cannot be added to the deed. They cannot inherit the house. They cannot contest the transfer because the transfer was made by you, of sound mind, in the presence of legal counsel and a notary, without any duress and with the full procedural protections of California trust law. I closed my eyes. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I said, Persephone. Yes. Tessa, my granddaughter, she is 11. She does not yet know that this is happening. She does not need to know. The trust will be administered by my firm until she is 25. You may tell her, when you decide it is time. Or I may tell her, when she turns 21, in a sealed letter you draft now. Many of my clients prefer the sealed letter. Persephone, I will draft the letter. I will draft it slowly, over the next several years, updated annually. I want Tessa, when she opens it, to understand not just what happened, but who I was, and who her grandfather was, and why this house is going to her and not to her parents. Catherine, that is the most generous instruction I have received from a client this year. We shook hands. I walked back to my car. I drove home. I arrived at the house at 11:19. I went in through the front door for the first time in months, because the front door of the house I no longer owned, but in which I now had an irrevocable lifetime occupancy, right, was once again a door I was entitled to use without apologizing. Magnolia was in the kitchen. She looked up. Catherine, how was the walk? Lovely, dear. Thank you. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat in the breakfast nook. I did not tell her. I did not tell anyone for 46 hours. I told Whitman on Saturday morning. I asked him to come into the den. I asked him to sit down. I asked Magnolia, who was in the kitchen, to please give us a few minutes alone, as a courtesy. She looked startled. She left. Whitman sat across from me in the armchair Augustine had loved. Mum, is everything okay? Whitman, I am going to tell you what I did this week. I am going to tell you once. I am not going to repeat it. I would like you to listen without interrupting. He nodded slowly. I told him. I told him about Saturday morning. The screen door. The phone call. Magnolia's voice. The phrase. The folder on the sideboard. The dinner Magnolia had told her mother was being planned. I told him about Adelaide. About Persephone. About Thursday morning at 10:01. About the trust. I told him that the deed was no longer mine. I told him that the deed was no longer his to inherit. I told him that Tessa would receive the house in trust on my death, untouchable by him or his wife, held until she was 25. I told him that this was irrevocable. I told him that I had chosen irrevocable because I did not trust myself. At 75, to hold a revocable position against a daughter-in-law, with a folder and a mother on speed dial. I told him this with the careful clarity of a woman who had rehearsed the sentences over 46 hours and was delivering them in the order they had landed in her mind. When I had finished, Whitman did not speak for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, Mom, the screen door. Yes, Whitman. You heard her. I heard her. Mom, I did not know she had said that. To her mother. I knew about the folder. I knew about the deed conversation. I told her. I told her on Wednesday night that I wasn't going to bring it up at dinner because it didn't feel right. But the phone call. She still thinks this house is hers. Mom, I did not know about that. I looked at my son. Whitman, I believe you. I also want you to understand something. The phone call is not what triggered Thursday. The folder is what triggered Thursday. The phone call simply clarified what the folder was. You and Magnolia were planning, on Sunday night, to ask me to add you to the deed. The phone call told me how you were planning to discuss me afterward. The combination of the two told me what kind of arrangement I was about to be invited into. Thursday is the response to the combination, not to the phone call alone. He nodded. He put his head in his hands. Mom, Magnolia is going to lose it. Whitman, Magnolia is going to feel many things this weekend. She may also, by Monday, be looking for a place for the two of you and the children to live. I want you to understand. The irrevocable transfer does not change your lifetime occupancy rights in this house, because you do not have lifetime occupancy rights in this house. You have been living here for 20 months as a guest. Today is the day the guest arrangement ends. I am giving you and Magnolia and the children 30 days to find a new place. I would suggest you begin today. I will not be co-signing any leases. I will not be paying any security deposits. You are 43 years old. You have a job. Magnolia has a job. You will manage. He was crying now. Mom, the kids. Whitman. The kids will live in a smaller apartment. Tessa will visit me every other Saturday for the rest of my life. She does not yet know that the house she has been living in for 20 months is going to be hers, in trust, on my death. She will not know until she is 21, when Persephone delivers her a sealed letter from me. Until then, she is simply my granddaughter, and I am simply her grandmother. And we will bake cinnamon rolls and read books together every other Saturday afternoon. That is the relationship. It begins the second Saturday after you move out. Mum, please. Whitman, I love you. I am not punishing you. I am simply allowing you, for the first time in your adult life, to live with the consequence of a wife you chose to defer to instead of standing beside your mother. The deed has answered the question you and Magnolia were planning to ask me. The answer is no, and it is permanent. And it was given by a piece of paper signed by me in a lawyer's office on Thursday morning, while you were drinking coffee in my kitchen and not knowing where I had gone. He nodded. He wiped his face. He stood up. Mum, I'll talk to Magnolia. Yes, sweetheart, you will. He left the den. I sat alone in Augustine's chair for a long time. I noticed that I could hear, faintly, through the wall, Magnolia's voice in the kitchen. She was on the phone again. I could not hear what she was saying. I noticed that I did not, this time, need to. That night, I sat in Augustine's reading chair in the living room with the small notebook I had started keeping the morning after the screen door, and I wrote one line. I walked into my own kitchen and heard her say the house wasn't mine. So I let the deed answer, and I learned, at 75, that an irrevocable trust is not a punishment, but a door. Signed in a lawyer's office on a Thursday morning, that closes behind you so completely that no one in the room you just left can follow you through it. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a screen door that does not latch on the first pull, in a phone call overheard from a mudroom bench, in a manila folder that never gets opened, and in a piece of paper signed by a woman who has finally decided that her own house is, in fact, hers. Then I closed the notebook, and I drank what was left of my tea, and I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has, for the first time in 20 months, gone to bed in a house she now occupies by law rather than by sufferance.